Assalamu alaikum students, hope you all are fine today. Today I have come forward with a new chapter, that is the living and the non-living. Students, if you have any queries or doubts related to the chapter after you listen the discussion of this class, you can call me every night between 8 to 10. So as you all know, the living and the non-living means all those organisms. If we can say that the organisms that have life, they are considered as living, and those things that do not have life, they are considered as non-living. If you look around you, you can see many things around you, and all the things that you see around you includes living as well as the non-living. So how can you differentiate between a living thing and a non-living thing? You can see me who is standing over here, your parents nearby you, your friends, the animals, the trees, or the plants. Likewise, many things that you can see around you which has life, they are considered as living beings. But if you talk about the table, the desks, the benches, the boards, the books, the pens, the pencil, the eraser, likewise, all these things which do not have life, they are called as non-living things. We know that living beings are very much different than the non-living things. Living beings have life, non-living things do not have life. So students, if you stop for a while and think about the living and the non-living things, what they have in common, we can see that living and the non-living things are both made of small particles known as matter. All the living and the non-living things are made of matter. If you can think about the matter, then you know that matter is anything which occupies space and has some mass. So anything that you see around you or anything that you are able to find around you is matter, is made of matter. So it occupies space and has some mass. Thus everything around us, whether it is living or non-living, has mass and it occupies space. The smallest particle of matter are called molecules. So if we talk about the smallest particle of matter that is found in water, you can say that it is molecules. But in case of the living beings, we cannot consider these molecules are the smallest particle of matter, because living beings are made of smallest particle which we call as the cells. Now let us learn about the cells. When you were in a previous class, you have learned a little bit about the cells. These cells are nothing but these are the basic structural and functional unit of life. It is the cell which leads to all the functions or the activities of a living organism. As big organism or as an organism, it grows up from these cells only. So this cell is the smallest unit or the thing which is capable of life. When we go for learning about the characteristics of a living being, we can see that a living being has got many characteristics. Let us go one by one. Living beings are made of cells. So we all know that all the living beings are made of cells. So the cells that we find in different living organisms are of different shapes, sizes, and structure. They even perform different functions. As they are of different shapes, sizes, and structures, they perform different functions. What is the cell? In short, we can say it is the basic structural function and functional unit of life, which leads to give life. All the living beings are made of cells, but as you have seen for yourself, all cells do not look alike. They are of different shapes, sizes, and structures, and they perform different functions. The onion cells you observed, for example, form a covering and protect the other cells inside the onion leaf. So we find different types of cells in case of the plants as well as in case of the animals. If we go for observing such cells under the microscope, we can learn it better, because plant cells have got a cell wall, whereas animal cells do not have cell wall. Likewise, there are many differences that are found between a plant cell and an animal cell. You will learn it when you will go in your higher classes. Now let's discuss the second topic, that is organization in living beings. The organization of in living beings, it starts from the cell itself. From the cells, it leads to tissues. Then after tissues, organs are formed. Then from the organs, we get the organ system. These are the different levels of the organization of a living being. As you have already learned about the cells, let's discuss about the tissues. What are these tissues? Tissues are a group of similar cells which helps in performing a particular function. These are groups of similar cells which always helps in performing a particular function. For example, the skin tissue or the muscle tissue. Skin tissue has got all the cells of the same type and it helps in performing a particular function, that is, it helps us to feel. Or if you talk about the muscle tissues, also has got the same type of cells which also helps in performing the movements in our body. We know muscles are meant for performing movements in our body. Likewise, all the tissues that we have in our body, they are formed of similar cells and are meant for performing a particular function. If you talk about the organs, organs are formed of a group of cells. A group of tissues which work together to perform one or more functions is called an organ. For example, the heart, the lungs, the eyes, likewise many organs that we have in our body. Okay, these are formed of one or more tissues and they help in performing one or more functions. Lastly, we have got the organ system and group of organs which cooperate with each other to perform a particular function. Here, in case of the organ system, we find a group of organs, they used to cooperate with each other to perform a particular function. So it is called an organ system. Our next topic is living beings grow. Students, you all know that no one needs to tell you that you are growing. Yes, it is known to you that when you were born, you were a tiny baby. But now, if you look yourself or if you look at your friends, you can see that some of you are 4 to 5 feet tall. So it clearly indicates that we are growing, or you will be growing further in your upcoming years. So what is the difference that we find in case of the plants even related to the growth? We find all the living beings, they grow. We find that all the living beings grow. But in case of the plants and the animals, there is certain differences. Living beings, they grow, but in case of the non-living beings, they do not grow. But there is a difference in between the animals and the plants. Animals, they grow up to certain age and they stop growing. But if we talk about the plants, they grow throughout their lives. Take the example of your father. When they were like you, they were of your age. When they were of your age, they were growing. But now they have stopped growing. That means they are not able to grow taller than the height that they are right now. That means it indicates that they have stopped growth in their body. That means such differences we find in case of the animals related to the plants. Plants, they grow throughout their lives, but the growth in the plants are very slow. We are not able to identify it. We are not able to observe it. In plants, we see the leaves used to grow every year, the flowers used to bear, the fruits used to bear. So these are some of the growths that takes place in case of the plants throughout their lives. You might be thinking about the golmohar tree that you have right near your house or nearby your neighbor's house. Why it is not growing? It is not like this that the golmohar tree is not growing. If you go on observing that when it was small, a tiny seedling, it was occupying just a small space on the ground. But now it has become so big enough that it has occupied the entire surrounding of the very ground. So it indicates that it has grown. And every year you are able to find that new leaves are coming out, new branches, new twigs are coming out. So all this tells us that the tree is having growth. Our next topic is regarding the living beings follow a life cycle. All the living beings, they follow a life cycle. That means all the living beings, they grow and they, after living for some years or some days, they die again. All the organisms that are living, okay, they have got a definite lifespan. You have got a table on your text. You can refer table 7.1, house spider. Its lifespan is 3 to 4 days. Dog 16 to 18 years. Man 60 to 100 years. Pigeon 15 to 20 years. Alligator 50 to 55 years. Likewise, all the living organisms have got different lifespan. That means all the organisms, they start from a single cell and they grow up into a big size, and later on, after living for some years, what happens is that after having a definite lifespan, they die again. So all organisms follow the life cycle of birth, growth, reproduction, aging and death. So this topic tells us that all living beings follow a life cycle. Our next topic is living beings reproduce. As you all know that you were born from your parents, and when you will all grow up, you will also reproduce. You will also be able to reproduce. So it is not essential that all the organisms have to reproduce, but we are able to reproduce because we are living beings. Likewise, if we forget about us and talk about the other animals, all the other organisms, as they are living, they are also able to reproduce. They are able to give birth to the young ones. They are able to reproduce copies of themselves. So living beings have the characteristic to reproduce. Likewise, living beings need food even. We know that we are not able to live, or we are not able to survive without food. All the living organisms, they need food to survive or to perform all their daily activities. Because this food that they take, it helps them to give energy to carry out various functions, to grow and maintain the body, and also to fight different diseases that they are supposed to have in their body. They get their food in different ways. All the animals or all the living organisms, they are able to get their food in different ways. Animals are called heterotrophs. That means they depend on others for food. All those organisms or animals which are not able to make food by themselves, but they have to depend on other animals for their food, they are called as heterotrophs. For example, the cows, the goats, the zebras, these organisms, they often depend on other organisms for their food. So they come under these heterotrophs. If we talk about autotrophs, green plants are called autotrophs. All these organisms which comes under autotrophs, they are able to manufacture food by themselves. So they are called autotrophs, and these green plants are considered as autotrophs because they are able to make food by themselves by undergoing a process known as photosynthesis. You all know what is photosynthesis. It's a process by which green plants are able to manufacture food by themselves in the presence of sunlight by absorbing water and minerals from the soil and carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. So by undergoing such processes, green plants are able to make food by themselves. So this is all for the characteristic living beings need food. Our next characteristic is that living beings also respire. Living beings also respire. That means they are able to exchange gases with the atmosphere. All the living beings, they undergo the respiration process. They exchange gases with the atmosphere, and respiration is a process in which what happens is that they used to take in air and water, letting oxygen combine with food and produce energy for their body by throwing out carbon dioxide and water vapor. So the process of taking in air or water, letting oxygen combine with food and throwing out carbon dioxide and water vapor is known as respiration. If you talk about the plants, they don't have nose or mouth like us or like the other animals. So how do they undergo this respiration? We have learned that living beings respire. So plants are also living beings. How do they respire? They used to respire with the help of They are tiny pores that they have in their leaves, which are known as stomata. Plants respire with the help of the tiny pores present on their leaves, which are known as stomata, and this stomata helps to exchange gases with the atmosphere. If you take a leaf and observe it under a microscope, you will be able to observe the tiny pores present on the leaves. So this is all about the characteristic living beings respire. Our next characteristic of living beings is that living beings undergo excretion, or you can simply write excrete. Living beings excrete. That means all the living organisms, they used to throw out unwanted things that are not required for their body by undergoing different processes. So let us learn one by one how the living organisms throw the unwanted things, or which are considered as waste for their body. They used to throw out waste from their body in the form of urine, stool, or we can call feces, and even sweat by sweating. All living organisms uses food to produce energy, and the process of breaking down food and combining food with oxygen produce some wastes. So at the time of obtaining energy from the food, what happens? Some wastes are produced. So these wastes, which the organism needs to throw out, it is known as excretion. So the process of throwing out or expelling waste from the body is known as excretion. They used to excrete waste from the body in the form of feces, urine, or sweat by sweating. If you talk about the plants, you might have never observed that how the plants used to throw out waste from their body. Yes, living beings, they excrete. So plants, as they are also living beings, they also need to undergo excretion process, because it's one of the characteristics of living beings. So how do the plants undergo excretion process? Students, you might have observed that some of the plants used to expel water from the leaves. Sometimes early in the morning, you might have observed that tiny droplets of water falling out through the leaves. So this water is the waste which is produced by the leaf. The excess water which was there in the plant body has been excreted out or expelled out from the leaves through tiny pores, which is called as stomata. And not only this, they also throw out some plant juices. You can see that the milky liquid. If you take a banana leaf, you can see the waters are coming out from the leaves. So it's nothing but it's a plant waste. Okay, and sometimes you can see a milk color liquid, which oozes out of the leaves of papaya or some other plants' leaves. So these are also considered as plant waste. Or sometimes you might have observed the rubber trees, okay, which also excretes out a plant waste known as latex, and this latex is a plant waste, okay, which is released from the plant, okay, and is used for other purposes. Our next characteristic regarding living beings is that living beings respond to stimuli. Living beings respond to stimuli. Students, as you all know that at the time when someone comes near you and produces a loud noise near your ears, what happens is that you used to close your ears. Or if you happen to see a new things, suddenly a surprise thing near your eyes, that means which you have not thought even, that you became so much surprised after seeing the thing. Or sometimes suppose you have guessed that your best friend has come to your house, which has given you a great shock that you become so excited something a surprise thing, you can say, or sometimes it happens that suddenly you have not expected someone to come to your house, but suddenly you saw the person near your eyes. So at that time, what happens is that your eyes gives a blink. So this blinking of your eyes or closing of your ears during loud sounds, so these are certain stimuli which are produced by our body responding to the stimuli. That means these are certain types of actions which are performed by a body responding to the stimuli that we have got surrounding our body. All the living beings, they respond to external stimuli. A stimulus is something which produces a response or reaction in a living being. Temperature, light, water, pressure, sound, touch, and chemicals are some external stimuli, we can say. Sometimes when we happen to walk uh, on a hot day on the road, on the street, what happens is that we expect to have shade on our head. So we are not able to bear the heat of the sun. So it is because of the it is because of the response or the reaction which is produced by our body responding to the stimuli, that is the temperature or the heat. Or sometimes during rainfall, you happen to forget taking an umbrella. So at the time of walking on the street without umbrella, when it is when there is heavy rain, you feel of taking an umbrella. So such reactions or actions which helps your body to feel or to respond to something, this is all about stimuli. That means this is called stimuli. You might have heard about a plant known as touch-me-not plant. It is also known as mimosa. This mimosa plant, which is commonly called touch-me-not, these plants, if you go nearby the plant and touch it with your fingertips, what happens is that the plant used to show a certain response by closing its leaves, showing that it is dead. So these are also certain types of response produced by the plant. The touch is the stimuli which gives response to it. Likewise, many plants, they are able to show responses on the stimulus, but most of the plants responding to their stimulus can't be observed. But especially in case of the touch-me-not plant, we are able to observe it very clearly. Nextly, the last characteristic that we are going to discuss is living organisms show movement. All the living beings are able to move. But if you talk about the plants, they also move. You might be thinking how the plants are moving. They are not moving from one place to other place. How can I say that plants are moving, having movement? It is very much sure that we can see that plants moving from one place to other place like the other animals. Yes, it is right. The place where it was before, in the same place we find the same tree. Yes or not? Suppose you have got a mango tree out your house. That mango tree will remain in its place the very next morning when you go for observing it. That means it indicates that it has not moved from its place. But it is not like this. Plants also have movement. All the plants, they have movement, but the movement in case of the plants is so slow, which becomes quite invisible or invisible to our eyes. We are not able to observe it because the movement of the plant is very slow. If you need an example, you can think that sometimes when the wind blows, what happens? The leaves of the plants is to show some movement. Just now I've given you the example of the touch-me-not plant. When you have touched the leaves of the plant, what happens? It has shown some movement. So these are some of the movements that we see in case of the plants. Okay, but the movement of the plants are very slow, which we can't observe it with our eyes. This is all that you need to remember. When you will go to your to higher classes, you will learn more regarding this topic. So, my dear students, hope you all have catch up with the points that I have discussed. So with this, I end up my class. Thank you. Have a nice day.